The lunch rush at Paddy's Corner Diner had already thinned out by the time Maya Denton wheeled herself through the front door. It was a Tuesday, just past 1 in the afternoon, and the smell of bacon grease and fresh coffee still hung in the warm air like a familiar promise. Maya liked Tuesdays. The diner was never too loud on Tuesdays, never too crowded, and Paddy herself was usually behind the counter, always ready with a refill and a real smile. Not the kind people gave Maya when they were trying too hard, that wide, overcompensating grin that made her feel like a child at a school play. Paddy's smile was the regular kind. The kind that said, "You're just a person, and I'm glad you came in." Maya parked her wheelchair beside the window booth she always liked, the one with the cracked vinyl seat patched over with silver duct tape and a view of the parking lot where pigeons gathered around an old bread crust like it was a religious site. She pulled off her jacket, tucked it behind her, and flagged down a waitress, a new girl, young, maybe 19, with a ponytail so tight it looked like it hurt. "Just a BLT and a lemonade," Maya said. "No ice, please." The girl nodded without writing it down and disappeared into the back. Maya pulled out the worn paperback she'd been carrying for 2 weeks, a mystery novel she kept restarting because life kept interrupting it, and she opened it to page 43. She read 4 sentences before she heard them. They came in loud. 3 of them. 2 guys and a girl, early 20s, the kind of young that hasn't yet learned it won't last forever. The girl had bleached hair and a laugh that could strip paint. One of the guys was thick-necked, wearing a football jersey with no team name, just a number, like he'd printed it himself. The other one was wiry, restless, the kind of person who couldn't stand still because being still meant being alone with his own thoughts, and that was too much to handle. They took the booth directly across from Maya. Not because they had to. The diner was mostly empty. They chose it deliberately. She could feel it the same way you feel weather changing before it rains. At first it was just noise. They ordered loudly, laughed at nothing, threw sugar packets at each other across the table. Maya kept reading. Or pretending to read. Page 43 again. The same 4 sentences. Then the thick-necked one glanced over at her. She didn't look up, but she felt it, that particular quality of attention that has weight to it, the kind that doesn't want anything good. "Hey," he said. Not to his friends. To her. Maya turned a page she hadn't read. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Lady in the wheelchair." She looked up slowly. Kept her face steady. "Can I help you?" He grinned at his friends. "She can help us. That's cute." Back to her. "You come here alone? That's safe. I mean, what if something happened and you needed to, you know?" He mimed running, pumping his arms, and the bleached hair girl laughed on cue like she'd been waiting for a signal. "I'm fine," Maya said. Flat. Clean. No invitation in it. But that kind of flat, clean answer was exactly the wrong thing to say to someone who needed a reaction. It was too composed. It made him feel small, and small people who've never learned to sit with smallness always try to make the other person smaller. He slid out of the booth and walked over. Stood too close. Not touching, but close enough that Maya could smell his cologne, something cheap and sharp. He picked up her book from the table, looked at it like it was a joke, set it back down crooked. "What happened to you?" he asked. "Were you born like that or did something mess you up?" "Neither one is your business." "Ooh." He looked back at his crew. "She's got an attitude." The wiry one had his phone out now. Maya could see the screen from where she sat. He was filming. That was the whole point, she realized. The performance of it. The content of it. They were shooting a video of themselves being cruel to a disabled woman in a diner, and they thought it was entertainment. The new waitress with the tight ponytail came out with Maya's lemonade. She set it down without making eye contact with anyone and vanished immediately, like smoke. "You should smile more," the bleached hair girl called over from the booth. "It helps." "Helps what?" Maya asked. "Helps people feel less, you know, uncomfortable." Maya looked at her for a long moment. "You make yourself uncomfortable," she said quietly. "I'm just sitting here." That was when it escalated. The thick-necked guy reached out and knocked Maya's lemonade over. Not hard, almost casual, like it was an accident, except it absolutely wasn't. The glass toppled and lemonade spread across the table and soaked into her paperback, blooming yellow into page 43 and all the pages around it. For a half second, nobody moved. Then he leaned down close to her face and said, low enough that the phone might not catch it, "Clean it up." She didn't move. She looked at him with the kind of stillness that comes not from fear but from something much older and much harder than fear, the stillness of a person who has been underestimated so many times that she has stopped being surprised by it and started, in some quiet corner of herself, almost expecting it, which made her neither broken nor bitter, just patient. He straightened up. Looked disappointed she hadn't cried. That was what he wanted. That was always what they wanted. Pathetic, he muttered, and he raised his open hand and slapped the table beside her, hard, right next to her arm, close enough that the sound made her flinch even though he hadn't touched her. And that flinch, involuntary and honest and human, made him smile. That was when Paddy herself came out from the back. She was 62 years old, 5'3", and had been running this diner for 31 years. She stood at the end of the counter with a dish rag in her hand and looked at the three of them with the expression of a woman who had seen everything and was no longer impressed by any of it. "You need to leave," she said. "We didn't do anything. You need to leave my restaurant right now or I'm calling the police." The thick-necked guy looked at her like he was deciding something. Then he decided wrong. "Old lady," he said, "mind your—" "I already called," said a man's voice from the back corner. Everyone turned. An older man, maybe 70, trucker hat, flannel shirt, sitting alone over a cup of coffee nobody had noticed him nursing for the past hour. He held up his phone. "Already called. About 4 minutes ago." "So?" He took a slow sip. "You got maybe 3 minutes, I'd guess. Depending on traffic." The three of them looked at each other. The wiry one lowered his phone. The bleached hair girl was already reaching for her bag. They left without paying. The door swung shut behind them, and the diner settled back into its quiet, the way a pond reseats itself after a stone. Paddy came over with a clean rag and fresh lemonade. She wiped the table without saying anything for a moment. Then, "You okay, honey?" "Yeah," Maya said. And mostly she was. Mostly. There was a shaking in her hands that she controlled by pressing them flat against the armrests of her chair, but inside she was doing what she always did, sorting through the experience the way you sort through mail, putting the pieces in their proper piles. The older man with the trucker hat came over and set her ruined paperback on the table. He'd picked it up off the floor without her noticing. "Thank you," she said. He shrugged. "I got a daughter your age." He went back to his coffee. The waitress with the tight ponytail brought out Maya's BLT without being asked and set it down carefully. And this time she did make eye contact, briefly, and said, "It's on the house," and then went red in the face and retreated. Maya ate her lunch. She read her book, page 43. Still, the pages warped and faintly yellow now, but readable. The diner hummed around her. Silverware on plates, low radio from the kitchen, the groan of the front door opening and closing. She was on page 51 when she heard the motorcycles. Not one. Not two. A sound like low-rolling thunder, the kind that starts at the edge of hearing and builds until it is everything, and then the parking lot outside her window was filling with them. Big bikes, chrome catching the afternoon light, riders in leather with patches on their backs, pulling in one after another until there were 11 of them arranged in a loose half-circle in front of Paddy's corner diner. Maya set down her book. The leader came through the door first. He was big, not in the gym-built way of the thick-necked boy from before, but in the way of a man who had spent decades doing real things with his body. Late 50s, grey at his temples, a beard gone mostly silver. He had the kind of face that had been weathered by actual weather. Behind him came the others, and they filled the diner with the smell of road and engine and something warm underneath it that Maya couldn't name. The leader looked around until he found her. Then he walked over, pulled out the chair across from her, the regular chair, not the booth, and sat down like they'd had an appointment. "Somebody called us," he said. Maya blinked. "Who?" He nodded toward the counter. Paddy was behind it, refilling coffee, not looking at anyone. Maya stared at Paddy for a moment, then looked back at the man across from her. He had his hands folded on the table, big hands, scarred across the knuckles, the kind of hands that had fixed engines and carried heavy things and maybe, once or twice, settled arguments that words couldn't finish. "She called you," Maya said. It wasn't really a question. "She called Darnell." He nodded toward one of the men behind him, a broad-shouldered black man in his 50s with a grey streak in his beard and a patch on his jacket that reads Sergeant at Arms. "Darnell's wife comes in here every Sunday. Has for 12 years. Paddy's got his number in her phone under Big D, emergency only." The corner of his mouth moved. Guess she decided this was an emergency. Maya looked around at the 11 of them filling the diner. 2 had taken seats at the counter. The rest stood or leaned, patient and unhurried, like men who had learned that most things worth doing required waiting first. None of them were performing anything. That was what she noticed most. There was no theater to it, no posturing, no look-at-us energy. They had simply arrived, the way weather arrives, and now they were here. "I'm Maya," she said. "Ray," the leader said. He didn't offer his hand, which she respected. Too many people thrust hands at her like she needed proof they weren't afraid to touch her. "You want to tell me what happened?" So she told him. All of it. The booth, the cologne, the knocked-over lemonade, the phone filming, the slap on the table that was close enough to be a threat without being one. She told it straight, no drama added, the way she'd learned to tell things because adding drama made people focus on the drama instead of the facts. Ray listened without interrupting. The men behind him listened too, the diner gone quiet enough that she could hear the kitchen radio playing something old and country. When she finished, Ray was quiet for a moment. "The one who filmed it," he said. "You see what he looked like? Wiry. Maybe 22. He had a tattoo on his left forearm. Looked like a snake or a lightning bolt, I couldn't tell which." Ray glanced back at Donnell, who had already pulled out his phone. "We are not going to hurt them," Ray said, catching her expression. "I want you to know that. That's not what we do. We find them, we talk to them, and they understand something about consequences that they didn't understand this morning. That's all." "How do you usually find them?" "Small town," he said simply. She looked at him for a long moment, measuring something. "Why?" she asked. "Why does Paddy call you for something like this? Why do you come?" Ray leaned back in the chair. It creaked under him. He seemed to be deciding how much of an answer to give, and then he seemed to decide to give the real one. "I have a sister," he said. "Cerebral palsy. She's 54 years old now, lives about 40 minutes east of here. When she was 19, she was waiting for a bus and 3 kids thought it would be funny to." He stopped, pressed his lips together, started again differently. Nobody did anything. People walked past. The bus driver saw and kept driving. He looked at the table. I was 21. I wasn't there. Wasn't even in the state. He paused. "I've been making up for not being there ever since. That's the honest answer." The diner was very quiet. Paddy set a coffee down in front of Ray without being asked. She set cups in front of whoever was at the counter. She moved through them like they were regulars, because in the way that mattered, they were. "You don't have to do anything else," Maya said. "They're gone." "They've got video of you on a phone," Ray said. "You want that up somewhere." She hadn't thought about that. Or she had thought about it and then pushed it away because there was a limit to how many bad things you could hold in your mind at once. But he was right. The wiry one had been filming the whole time, and people like that didn't film things to keep them private. They filmed things to post them, to collect reactions, to turn someone's worst moment into their own entertainment and let strangers pile on. "No," she said quietly. "I don't want that." Ray nodded once. "Then let us handle it." He pulled out his phone and stepped away from the table, and Maya watched him through the window as he stood in the parking lot making calls, unhurried, speaking to someone she couldn't hear. The rest of the men settled into the diner like they'd always been there. The wiry one, not the wiry kid, the wiry biker, older, with a long grey ponytail and a patch that read Nomad, struck up a conversation with the older man in the trucker hat in the back corner, and within 3 minutes they were talking about carburetors with the ease of people who'd known each other for years. The waitress with the tight ponytail had completely transformed. She was moving through the room with a confidence she hadn't had an hour ago, refilling cups, laughing at something Darnell said, the kind of ease that comes from the room feeling safe instead of dangerous. Maya watched her and thought about how quickly an environment could shift, how the same 4 walls could feel like 2 completely different places depending on who was in them. Ray came back inside and sat down again. "They're at a place called Shooter's. Bar about 2 miles from here. Apparently they go there most afternoons." He said it without satisfaction, just information. "Jimmy's going to ride over and have a conversation." "Just Jimmy." "Jimmy's enough." He said it in a way that was not a boast. Maya looked at her hands. The shaking had stopped at some point while she was talking. She wasn't sure exactly when. "What do you say to someone like that?" she asked. "In the conversation. What do you actually say?" Ray considered it. You explain to them that the world is larger than they think it is, he said. That the people they decide to treat like targets have people in their lives, friends, family, communities, and some of those communities have long memories and longer reach. You make it concrete. Specific. He picked up his coffee. Fear's not really the point. The point is that they understand their actions had an audience they didn't know about, and that audience is paying attention. Most people, when they realize they're actually seen, not watched, but seen, they change. Not always, but most. And if they post the video anyway, then we deal with that when it happens. And we will deal with it. He said it simply, the way you'd say the sky is blue. Maya picked up what was left of her lemonade. The replacement glass, the one Patty had brought after the first one was knocked over, was still half full, and she drank some of it and set it down. I want to ask you something, she said, and I want you to tell me honestly if it's out of line. Go ahead. Does it help? With your sister. Doing this? Ray looked at her for a long moment. Outside, a motorcycle engine turned over briefly and then went quiet. No, he said. Not really. She doesn't need me to avenge anything. She never did. She's fine. She's better than fine. She runs a ceramic studio. She's got a husband and 2 dogs, and she's genuinely the happiest person I know. He turned the coffee cup in his hands. I think I do it because I needed something to do with the anger. And this was a better option than some of the other things I came up with when I was 21. He looked up. Does that make sense? Yeah, Maya said. It does. They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, which was unusual. Comfortable silences with strangers were unusual for Maya in general, and with a 50-something biker in a diner where a crowd of his friends had just ascended, even more so. But it was comfortable. It was genuinely, inexplicably comfortable. Danielle came over and leaned down to say something quietly to Ray. Ray nodded. Video's been handled, he said to Maya. Jimmy got there fast. What did Jimmy say? Ray smiled for the first time. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, made him look like someone who had once been a kid who laughed easily before life had added the weight that now sat so naturally on him. He said please, Ray said. Very politely. And they said yes. Very quickly. Maya laughed. It surprised her, the laugh, and how real it was, and how it felt coming up from somewhere she'd thought was sealed off for the afternoon. Patty came over and refilled everyone's coffee and stood with her hand on Maya's shoulder for just a moment without saying anything, and Maya put her hand over Patty's hand, and that was its own kind of language. Outside, the afternoon light had shifted west. The pigeons were back at their bread crust. The parking lot full of motorcycles looked, in that particular slanted light, almost beautiful. All that chrome, all that road-worn leather, all those men who had come because one woman had called and because a long time ago a young man had failed his sister at a bus stop and had been trying ever since to become someone who wouldn't fail her now. Maya opened her book. Page 51. The pages still faintly yellow from the lemonade. She read all the way to page 70 before she finally went home.